Hello, everybody, and welcome to my one-take review of The Assignment. It is directed by Walter Hill, co-written by Walter Hill, also co-written by, what was his name? Somebody Hamill? Yeah, Dennis Hamill, not Mark Hamill. That's a different Hamill. But it stars Michelle Rodriguez, Sigourney Weaver, and Tony Shalhoub in a bit part. And I'm just going to give my thoughts on the movie. I'm going to try to do it in one take. Which means you're going to get a lot of ums and stuff like that. But I do have my notes. And what I did was I took my notes and I tried to combine some things together that could go together and rearrange them in a way that made a little bit more sense. And I'm just going to go into my thoughts, I'm going to go off track a little bit, but hopefully my notes will help keep me mostly on track. And we will, at the end, I'll kind of give a little bit of a summary of all my thoughts on the movie and how I felt about it and everything. So, first of all, the synopsis that I gave it. After assassin Frank Kitchen, played by Rodriguez, is betrayed by his employer and is given an unconsented gender reassignment surgery from a skilled surgeon, played by Weaver, he sets out looking for answers and revenge. So the first thing is it's a bit odd that there is a guy named Frank Kitchen, played by Michelle Rodriguez. That's kind of the most intriguing thing about the movie, probably, is that this is a character that started out, he was a male assassin, and he had a surgery to become female. And this is an intriguing concept. I have never seen this done in a movie before. So I was plenty excited to see that, just because it's something new and different. And I honestly am really a fan of Michelle Rodriguez. I think she's great. And I figured if anybody could do this kind of role, she could. So that made me a little bit more excited to watch it as well. And then, of course, you got Sigourney Weaver and Tony Shalhoub, and that just makes it even better because I love Tony Shalhoub from Monk. I feel like he should be great and everything, but he doesn't really get much to do. He doesn't seem to get to play in much big movies. Sigourney Weaver really, obviously she had Alien and stuff like that, but she kind of doesn't do a whole lot anymore, it seems like. So it was nice to have her around. But Michelle Rodriguez plays both the male and female versions, which I didn't quite expect. I don't know why I expected them to have someone else cast for playing Frank before the surgery. Really, though, I didn't think they were going to show much about what Frank was like before the surgery. I figured they would just kind of get into it and talk about it as in past tense. But we actually see plenty of Frank Kitchen early on, and it's actually he's played by Michelle Rodriguez, who is got facial hair and stuff, and they did whatever they could to kind of make her look more male, and they do everything they can to make her look more male, including having a scene where he walks in completely naked and you see his rubber parts, and the chest and everything has flattened out significantly, which was a little bit odd. I have to say that about halfway I was like, huh, that's interesting. It doesn't really look like her. But at the same time, it didn't look completely believable. So it was a bit of a weird 50-50 thing. And I got the same thing looking at Frank's face throughout all of it. Because I knew it was Michelle Rodriguez. There's just something about her eyes that just looked really familiar. And I just never could completely buy that it was a guy, because I knew it was Michelle Rodriguez. And I don't know if that's because I knew who she is and I know so well what she looks like and everything. Maybe it plays differently if you've never seen her before. Another thing is the voice, that it's a little strange. I couldn't decide how I felt about that the whole time, because it's like a very high voice for a guy. Not that it's unbelievably high, but then also they kept the voice the same, and it doesn't sound like normal Michelle Rodriguez. It sounds like her if she's trying to talk really deeper and trying to sound as much like a guy as she can. And it's okay. There's nothing super wrong with it, but it's also not entirely believable. And they really don't do much to explain how long, because the movie kind of starts out, we see a little bit of what Frank is like beforehand, but it doesn't take long before we get straight to right after the surgery had been done on Frank's side. There's a little bit of double stories. We got Frank's thing, and then we've got Sigourney Weaver's character, Dr. K. We can kind of go back and forth between them. But for the sake of right now, we're going to talk about Frank. So Frank is kind of waking up in his apartment building, and it's been shortly after the surgery, but they don't really tell us how shortly after the surgery it is, and it's pretty much impossible to figure it out because there's no scars or anything. There's no signs that a surgery had taken place, except for he had his face wrapped the whole way through, like it was all kind of gauze and stuff. It's the stuff that you have after surgeries. So you would think that there's actually reasons for that to be there, and that it hasn't been very long. When he takes it all off, it's Michelle Rodriguez's face. There's no scars. There's nothing wrong with it at all, which makes things really confusing. You can't tell how long after the surgery it's been. You would assume it has to have been a while because of the fact that there's no scars and stuff on the face, but at the same time, there's other plot points that make it seem like it hasn't been very long. I wasn't bothered too much by it, although it was something that has to be pointed out, I think. I just kind of figured, this surgeon is just fantastic and is perfect. Pretty much, there is not going to be any marks because this doctor is that good. It's just kind of the way I took it, but it was still a bit unbelievable. But it was fine with me. I could kind of suspend my disbelief for that. To give them a little bit of credit, there was a scene where you could kind of see some blood running down his leg, showing that there was a problem with all of the activity that he's doing after having the surgery. Also, you might notice that I keep referring to the character as he, because there's a bit of a problem that I could run into with trying to decide if I should call the character he or she, but specifically because of the way things play out in the movie and the point that the movie makes and the choice it has about this particular character's gender and everything. They came to the conclusion that he is still a he, so I'm going to use their logic and their reasoning and continue to call him a he. At one point in the movie, they really start to focus a lot on the emotional and the psychological effects that this has on the character, having this surgery done on someone who didn't want it. Because it was a man who was most proud of his masculinity more than anything, and that was taken away from him. And it's a big deal. It's a big thing, even when people do it intentionally, willingly. There's a long process that you have to go through to think about it and make sure that that's really what you're wanting to do, because it's a big thing. And this character didn't get any of that and had no desire to do that at all. So it had a big effect. And there's certain moments where they start to push on that, and I started to think, okay, so maybe we're not going to go for that really light action movie thing where they kind of touch on it for a second, and they might go, oh no, this person screwed me over, I need revenge, and they don't focus on it too long, and they just move on to the revenge plot. But this started to actually take some time to sit and think about it, and show that this character is in a seriously bad mental state right now, and that this has had a horrible effect on him. But it only does it so effectively. It starts to do it and then kind of gives up after a while, but then it comes back to it, but then it doesn't really push very much for that. And it was kind of stuck in this weird in-between place where it couldn't do the light, let's ignore this and move on to the revenge plot, or the very serious psychological type of a movie. And it was just kind of somewhere in between, and it didn't quite work. They did a strange non-linear storytelling thing that kind of confused me. We'll follow the character of Frank Kitchen and what's going on with him and his revenge plot. And then we also cut back to Dr. K. And she has been arrested, and she's in a, straitjacket. And she is having a conversation with this other psychological doctor, played by Tony Shalhoub, named Dr. Galen. And he's trying to figure out what's going on with this character, what's wrong with her, what is she up to, and why. Because there's clearly something a little messed up there. And they're having discussions, and they're trying to give us this kind of vibe that she's a genius, and she's going to be able to outsmart anybody, or they're never going to understand what she's thinking. And really, she just kind of comes off as being like a nerd when it comes to old books. She like repeats very old writings and things. It doesn't come across like she's actually smart. She just knows some writing stuff. She knows some quotes, which is great, but that doesn't mean you're a genius. They could have done some more things, maybe with some manipulation of the doctor or something really interesting that would have been cool and would have shown that she's a genius. They didn't do that. But like I was saying, they have her where she's been arrested, but this whole interview and everything between these two takes place after everything that happens with Frank Kitchen, which I got it after a while. I understood what they were doing, so it's not like I was super confused, but it did confuse me a little bit, and I don't think it was necessary because ultimately I didn't care about their conversation. It was just boring, and I couldn't tell you most of what the conversations were between the two of them because I just didn't care. Most of the time I was just thinking, I wish this could end so I can move on to the revenge plot. But then there comes another problem. We go to the revenge plot, and the revenge plot is not that great. I mean, there was certain moments where it started to act like it was really going to kick in, but nothing really did. It just got to the point where we would have an action scene, but then the action was just kind of It wasn't really exciting. It was just kind of, it happened. There was actually one particular scene where I actually started to feel like it was going places. So Frank gets to a point where in kind of some voiceover, he's sitting there talking, and we're kind of watching the gear up scene where we're getting guns and locking and loading them and getting bullets ready and all that fun stuff. And Frank is saying that there's 3 things that he needs to find out. Kind of 4, but we'll call it 3. So the first thing he wants to find out is why would they betray him after doing a good job? He was hired to do a job. He did it well. Why did they come back at him after that? The deal was the deal. It was a good deal. So what would make them do that? Second, why the butcher job, as the character calls it? Why do the weird surgery thing when they could have just killed him or whatever they wanted to do? And third thing is, who is this doctor? And 3B, how is this person connected to Honest John? Honest John was the one who hired him to do the hit that he did, and pretty much all the other hits he's done, I think. So this actually seemed really interesting. This was the part of the movie where I'm like, okay, cool. We actually have some goals we're heading towards. We're gonna watch our character kind of go and find these people and learn bits of information and build on it. But that's not really what happened. For the most part, it was just, all right, let's kill everyone that works for Honest John. That's fine. But it would have made more sense for what they acted like they were going for, and honestly, it would have been a cooler movie if they were finding out little bits of information in every place that he went, and that led him to the next place, or it was building to something. There was a little bit learned here, and then we learned the next bit that just heightens everything a little bit more, and it keeps going until we get to something. And it kind of did that, I guess, but it was not very well done. They have a bit of a plot twist. I'm not going to spoil it because maybe somebody wants to go watch the movie. I can't really tell you why, but I'm not going to spoil it because you might enjoy it. You're not me. But we kind of just go around and we kill some people, and then we kill some more people, and we kill some more people, which would still be fine. Like John Wick, there's just tons of killings, but it's done in a really cool way. It's shot really well, and there's some awesome stunts and things. This wasn't that cool. It was just fine. Which, there's nothing terrible about just being fine, but this was the one thing that I was hoping would work. I'm fine with a dumb action movie as long as there's actually some cool action in it too. But it just wasn't there. And it got to something that was happening, and it was like, okay, this was kind of a dumb plot twist. I don't think this was necessary. And this is kind of where we get to a point where our character is getting ready to shoot another character, and they do a stupid thing that I honestly don't see it very often, but we shouldn't, where this person's trying to decide whether Frank is trying to decide whether or not to kill this person, and we're at the point where he's holding the gun to the head and is trying to decide whether to shoot it or not. And we see him shoot, and blood hits the wall. Obviously, he killed the character, and you're like, huh, well, at least it had the balls to go ahead and do that. But then they take it back, and for some reason, apparently, the person was just thinking about it. I don't know. But it turns out that they didn't actually shoot the person. The person lives. But that's really stupid. The only reason they did that was to try to give us the shock of it happened or something like that. There's no reason to show us what could have happened and then what actually happened unless this is something that you've established as something your character does. Now, I have two examples of this working decent, or working well, in my opinion. I like both of these movies. There's Sherlock Holmes, where the Sherlock Holmes character, whenever he gets into a fight or anything like that, you see him kind of planning everything out, and you hear the voiceover of him saying, okay, I'm going to do this, and then this, and this. And you see it all play out the way that he's hoping it will, or expecting it to. And then we switch very clearly to what's really happening, and then you see it all take place. And it's cool. It looks awesome. So anytime this happens, you know that this is something set up from early in the movie, that this is something he does. Another one is Premium Rush, where the guy is riding his bike. He's kind of like a bike messenger dude. A very high valued one. But he's riding his bike through New York City or whatever city he's in, and there's times where he'll get to an intersection or someplace where it's going to be very difficult, and he'll kind of plan out different paths of where he could try to go and what he could try to do. And this is something he does several times in the movie, so it makes sense to kind of see it take place once and then take place in real time. But this is the only time in the movie that happens, and there's no indication that this is trying to look ahead or something like that. It just is played as if this was actually happening, but it doesn't, and they never were going to. So it's just a really cheap way of trying to make you feel like something happened, but then they just back out of it. It would have been fine if they did it, but do it or don't. You can't have both. Is kind of my thoughts on that, and it really kind of aggravated me when they did that. And there were a couple of really stupid moments where there's just little things that just don't make any sense. For example, when Dr. K is talking to Dr. Galen, Dr. K is in a straitjacket and says, well, can you at least release my arms so that way I can have the use of them? At least I'll still be in the straitjacket. That's the entire point of a straitjacket, is to reduce the use of your arms. If he releases your arms, that completely reduces the use of the straitjacket, so still wearing it doesn't mean anything. And that would have been interesting if she was trying to manipulate him, or if he was an idiot and let her go and then she did something with the freedom of her arms, but no. It was as if the straitjacket didn't mean anything even if the arms were let loose, which doesn't make any darn sense. And then there's another one where there's a character who has been stealing medicine from a hospital because she works there. And apparently the hospital never notices there's medicine missing. They would find out whether maybe they don't have a security camera and they don't see it, but they will know that there's more medicine missing than there should be, and they will bring some kind of check in to make sure that nobody's stealing it, because that's the kind of thing that would happen in a hospital. I guarantee you that would not go on very long. They would figure it out. There's a lot of just really small things that maybe it's just a little thing, so it's not too terrible, but there's kind of a lot of them. And there's a couple of other things that are less plot related and more just part of making the movie that really didn't fit and didn't make any sense, and also was just totally missed. For example, there's at least 2 points that I noticed in the movie where the audio and video were off. And it's not like it was a stylistic choice or anything. It was just like it was edited wrong. I don't know if they were in a hurry at that point, if it was running late and they had to hurry up and throw it the last bit together and couldn't spend as much time as they needed to on it. But either way, that's not something you should see in a Hollywood movie, in a big budget movie. That's not something you should see from a professional director. Like, you don't want to do that in a student film. So that's just sloppy. That's terrible. And there's some other things, some other little things that had happened. Like, he puts like some weird comic book transitions in it, which happens early on. There's like a weird little comic book transition where we get to the end of the scene, and then it kind of the last shot we start seeing in like sketch form, and it's like, oh, okay. I mean, that looks kind of cool. I didn't realize that was the tone of the movie, but that's cool if that's what you're going for once, I guess. But then they did it a couple of times, but not enough to make it like a normal thing. So it felt really out of place because it wasn't consistent. It was another case of do it or don't. It just looked really odd the way that they ended up putting it in. And they had just a bunch of other transitions that just looked a little weird, and it didn't play very well for me. There's one point during the boring conversation between Dr. K and Dr. Galen where Dr. K has been talking about Frank Kitchen as being this person who did this stuff, which you don't know what she's even talking about till you get to the end of the movie. But she's saying that Frank Kitchen exists and did this thing and did this stuff and stuff. I couldn't even tell you entirely what happened because I didn't care about the conversation. But Dr. Galen has been trying to look and see if this person exists, and no matter what resources they use, I forget what all branches of the government he names, but there's high-level intelligence people in their resources, and he says that there is no Frank Kitchen. Frank Kitchen does not exist. So the first thing I thought of was, there's a lot of people in the world with a lot of different names, but a lot of names actually are pretty similar. If you were to Google Frank Kitchen, I bet you'd find somebody. So I did, and the first thing that showed up was this guy. He's like a motivational speaker dude. It's super cool. And his name is Frank Kitchen. So I'm not sure why they couldn't find him. Maybe they were trying to say more specifically that the details she gave them about this particular Frank Kitchen doesn't match anyone. But I don't know. It didn't seem to me like that's what they were saying. It was a weird line, and it came across weird. Again, it's kind of, maybe it's a nitpick. I don't know. Who cares? And that's kind of where I went with this movie. I was totally fine with a dumb action movie. I enjoy dumb action movies. There's a lot of action movies that I know aren't well received, and there's a lot of problems with them. I don't care. They're fun. They're cool. Some of my favorite movies are The Transporter, and Jason Statham is one of my favorite performers. I enjoy what he does. I love the fact that he does his own stunts and he does some actual fighting. I mean, obviously they're not like beating each other up, but he does his own stuff. You can actually see everything happen in one shot in plenty of cases. He's actually doing the motions. They're not having to cut like crazy to show that it's happening. Make it look like it's exciting. And then there's other things where it's gun related, so you don't necessarily have to know martial arts, but it's done in a really cool, exciting way. And I enjoy action movies. Action movies are one of my favorite genres, possibly my favorite. But this just wasn't a good one. And it's a really big bummer because it had a lot of good people involved. Like Michelle Rodriguez is great. I love Michelle Rodriguez. Sigourney Weaver's cool. Tony Shalhoub doesn't get enough work, but he's cool. And I thought Michelle Rodriguez actually did fine. There were some of the emotional scenes that she does her part pretty well, I felt. The action scenes she does okay. With what she's given, but really what they're given is kind of what it comes down to. I don't think that it was a super well written movie. The dialogue was really boring. I don't really care how good your actors are. It's going to be very difficult to make a lot of that intriguing. And honestly, the most intriguing stuff was when we were actually watching Michelle Rodriguez play Frank Kitchen. And they did some interesting things with the character, and there was this kind of girlfriend that he had. It wasn't like a serious relationship, but it was a relationship of some kind that he had. And he was kind of really, really unsure of how she would receive it and if she would still accept him. And there was a lot of interesting things they started doing with that. And it was way more interesting than the boring conversations with the doctors. But even that, even though it was alright, it didn't really quite reach what it could have. It started pushing towards it, but didn't quite capture it. And that was unfortunate, but at least it did give me something other than the doctor conversations. And the problem with that, like I said, it's not well written. It's really boring. Tony Shalhoub does okay. He's trying. There's just not much he can do. Sigourney Weaver was kind of a little bit of an over-the-top kind of performance where I don't know. She just didn't. She was kind of strange, but at least she kind of seemed like she was trying to make it interesting, because everything she had was boring, and unfortunately, even with her efforts, it was still boring. Um, it was just a boring movie in a lot of ways. It was short, I guess, so that's a good thing. Really, all in all, it's a boring movie. It should have been so much better. I couldn't help but think throughout the movie, whenever something cool was happening, that it was starting to get there, and then it would drop off, and I'd be like, ah, oh, you started doing good. And anytime there was something happening and I was trying to defend it, I was like, ah, well, it's okay. I started thinking, well, you could do it this way, and this would be great. You could turn it from just it's serviceable to something that's actually a really good plot and a really, really, really interesting to follow, and you could have it build and build with each one of these places where she's going. I switched to she. I knew I was going to do that at some point. But Frank is going from place to place and killing people off, trying to get rid of all of Honest John's people, trying to get up to Honest John and trying to find answers. We could have been learning bits of the plot that the character didn't know, and we could have just been piling on more things to make it more tense or to make it more interesting, add some stakes. But it was really just kind of knocking people off to get up the ladder, and even that wasn't done very interestingly. So I just kept thinking throughout the whole thing, this is just kind of okay, but it could have been good. It could have been really good. And another one of the talented people involved is the director, Walter Hill, who I haven't seen any of his movies, so I can only say so much about it. But from what other people say, he's actually a legendary action director. And I'm looking forward to seeing some of his other movies. There were a couple of them that I can't remember off the top of my head, but there were some titles that I remember hearing were really, really good, and I want to go watch those. But to have somebody that's regarded that highly as an action movie creator to make this movie that's just really boring and is really a bummer. There's a lot of good people involved. I don't know what happened, if there was some reason that everything fell apart. I know a lot of times studios get involved and mess up the director/writer's vision, but it doesn't seem like that was the case as far as I can tell. It just didn't work. It was just a movie that didn't work, and it's unfortunate because it had a lot going for it. There are a lot of things that gave it a lot of potential. All in all, it's not something I could really recommend. If you really wanted to see Michelle Rodriguez, if Michelle Rodriguez is the main reason to watch it, go for it. She's not bad. She does her part probably better than anything else. Her stuff is the most interesting in the movie. If you're okay with a very mediocre, maybe a little less than mediocre movie, go for it. There's no reason why you can't get something out of it. There's just other places that you might be, spending your time a little bit better. Even for me, I wouldn't say that it was worthless or that I regret spending the time watching the movie. I still got something out of it. It was still interesting. There were some parts that kind of worked for me, and I enjoyed it. And it's just the problem for me is seeing so many places where it could have went from being just okay and not a waste of time to this is really good. This could have been great, and it just failed on a lot of opportunities. But if you, like I said, if you're okay with a mediocre movie, if you want to see some Michelle Rodriguez, Sigourney Weaver and Tony Shalhoub aren't great, but they're in it, and they're not totally terrible. So there's plenty of ways that you could get something out of it. Just make sure your expectations are low. Don't go into it expecting a great movie, or you will definitely be disappointed. And I think that's pretty much all I got to say about that movie. Let me know what you thought in the comments below, because I want to know what everybody else thinks if you've seen this movie, or let me know if you have any desire to see the movie at all. I know I don't give it the biggest, most shining recommendations, and the reviews really haven't been good. But I want to know what other people's opinions are, because this isn't just meant to be a place where I tell you how it is, or I tell you what this is supposed to be, what you're supposed to think. I want this to be the kind of thing where we can discuss and share our opinions of what we got from it. And maybe there's some things you noticed that I didn't, maybe the other way around, maybe there can be some people that can discuss things together down in the comment section. I want to share it and share our experiences and thoughts together. I don't want it to just be something where one person knows it all. because I don't know it all. I think I know quite a bit, but most of it's kind of subjective, and you just, it's all about whether or not you enjoy yourself, really, in the end. So I want to know what you guys think down there in the comment section below. And if you like the video, please let me know by hitting the like button. And if you want to see more from me, hit the subscribe button. And with that, all I can say is thank you for hanging out with me for a little while, and I'll see you again for the next one, talking movies. I'm gonna... I don't like you, little Matt. You need to die. Now I gotta figure out how I'm gonna cut that.